The blizzard came to Pyramid City, Nevada in late December of 1883 with a fury no one had predicted, turning the high desert town into a frozen wasteland that left everyone scrambling for shelter and warmth. Jennifer Bradford stood outside the white clapboard church with her carpetbag clutched against her chest, her wedding dress soaked through from the driving snow, her lips turning blue as she watched the last wagon disappear down the main street through the white curtain of falling ice. The Hendersons, the family who had promised to take her in after her mail-order marriage fell through, had looked at her with something between pity and disgust before climbing into their wagon and leaving her there without a word. She had traveled all the way from St. Louis, spent every penny she had on the train ticket and the dress she now wore, only to discover that the man who had written her such beautiful letters for 6 months did not exist. The address led to a boarding house where the landlady informed her that no one by that name had ever lived there, and Jennifer realized with growing horror that she had been the victim of a cruel hoax, someone's idea of entertainment at the expense of a desperate woman seeking a new life. The cold bit through her wet clothes like wolf teeth, and she could no longer feel her fingers or toes. She had knocked on 3 doors already, but the respectable families of Pyramid City wanted nothing to do with a woman who showed up alone in a wedding dress with no husband, no money, and no prospects. The 4th door she tried belonged to the minister himself, but his wife had taken one look at Jennifer and declared that they had no room for fallen women, slamming the door before Jennifer could explain that she had fallen for nothing except lies written in beautiful penmanship. The wind howled down the street, picking up loose snow and hurling it into her face until she could barely see 3 feet ahead. Her teeth chattered so violently she bit her tongue, tasting blood. The world began to spin, and she knew with a strange detachment that she was going to die here in this frozen wasteland, that her body would be found in the morning covered in snow like some tragic monument to foolishness and misplaced hope. She stumbled forward, no longer sure which direction she was walking, knowing only that she had to keep moving because the moment she stopped would be the moment she gave up entirely. Her vision blurred, whether from tears or snow or the onset of hypothermia she could not say. The buildings around her became indistinct shapes, ghosts in the whiteout. Her legs buckled and she fell to her knees in the snow, the cold seeping into her bones with a finality that felt almost peaceful. She thought of her mother, dead these 5 years, and wondered if she would see her soon. She thought of the brother who had married, and told her there was no room for her in his new household. She thought of all the small rejections and humiliations that had led her to answer an advertisement for a mail-order bride, to believe that somewhere out west there might be a place for her, a man who would see value in her that no one else had. A door opened somewhere close by, spilling golden light across the snow. Through the haze of her failing consciousness, Jennifer heard boots crunching through the drifts, heard a man's voice saying something she could not quite make out. Strong arms lifted her from the ground, and she tried to speak, to explain, to apologize for whatever burden she was about to become, but her mouth would not form the words. She felt herself being carried, felt the blessed warmth of an interior space, heard the door close behind her shutting out the howling wind. "Good Lord, you are frozen through," the voice said, and it was deep and rough but not unkind. "Can you hear me? Can you tell me your name?" She managed to open her eyes and found herself looking up at a face that seemed carved from the same rugged landscape as the desert surrounding this improbable town. He had dark hair that fell past his collar, eyes the color of strong coffee, and a jaw shadowed with several days of stubble. He was younger than she expected, perhaps only a few years older than her own 22 years, and there was something in his expression that spoke of genuine concern rather than the judgment she had grown accustomed to. "Jennifer," she whispered, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "Jennifer Bradford." "Well, Miss Bradford, I am Kade Turner, and you are safe now." He set her down on a chair near a pot-bellied stove that radiated heat like the sun itself. "I need to get you out of these wet clothes before the cold takes you for good. Do you understand? I am not trying to compromise you, but you will lose your fingers and toes if we do not warm you up." She nodded, beyond caring about propriety or reputation or any of the things that had once seemed so important. He moved with efficient purpose, pulling a thick blanket from a trunk and wrapping it around her shoulders before kneeling to remove her soaked shoes. His hands were calloused and warm, the hands of a man who worked for his living, and he handled her frozen feet with a gentleness that made her want to weep. "The dress needs to come off too," he said, not meeting her eyes. "I will turn my back and you can wrap yourself in this quilt. There is a screen in the corner if you can make it that far." Jennifer's hands shook so badly she could barely work the buttons, but she managed to peel the sodden wedding dress from her body and wrap herself in the heavy quilt he provided. The fabric smelled of cedar and wood smoke, clean and honest smells that spoke of a simple life honestly lived. She looked around the cabin as feeling slowly returned to her extremities in painful tingles. It was a single large room with a loft accessible by a ladder, sparsely furnished but scrupulously clean. A small kitchen area occupied one corner, a bed was tucked against the far wall, and the stove sat in the center like a benevolent guardian driving back the cold. "You can turn around," she said, and her voice was stronger now. Kade turned and studied her with those dark eyes, and she saw him taking in her bedraggled hair, her pale face, the way she clutched the quilt around her like armor. "What in heaven's name were you doing out in this storm in a wedding dress?" he asked. The whole miserable story came pouring out of her then, about the letters and the journey and the terrible discovery that she had been fooled, about the Hendersons who left her at the church and the doors that had closed in her face. She told him everything because she was too tired and too cold and too defeated to maintain any pretense of dignity. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight with what might have been anger. "The Hendersons left you outside to freeze." His voice was dangerously soft. "Thomas Henderson, who sits in the front pew every Sunday and talks about Christian charity. I do not think he knew what else to do with me," Jennifer said, though she did not know why she was defending the man who had abandoned her. "I am not his responsibility." "You were a human being freezing to death on his watch," Kade said flatly. "That makes you everyone's responsibility." He stood and went to the kitchen area, ladling something hot from a pot on the stove into a tin cup. "Drink this. It is just beef broth, but it will warm you from the inside." She accepted the cup gratefully, wrapping her hands around it and feeling the heat seep into her palms. The broth was rich and salty, and it tasted like life itself as it slid down her throat. She drank it slowly, savoring every drop, while Kade hung her wedding dress and undergarments near the stove to dry. He moved with the easy competence of a man accustomed to taking care of himself, and she found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking. He was tall and lean with the kind of whipcord strength that came from hard physical labor. His hands were scarred and capable, and there was something in the way he held himself that suggested he was a man who did not waste time or words on things that did not matter. "What do you do, Mr. Turner?" she asked, needing to fill the silence with something other than the memory of her humiliation. "I work the silver mines mostly," he said. "The big operations up in Virginia City when I need steady wages, the smaller claims around here when I want to try my luck. I break horses sometimes, do carpentry work, whatever pays." He glanced at her. "It is not a fancy life, but it is mine." "It looks like a good life," she said quietly, and she meant it. There was something appealing about the simplicity of this cabin, the lack of pretension. No one here was trying to be something they were not. "It is lonely," he admitted, and there was something in his voice that made her look up. "This town is not kind to strangers, as you have discovered. It is not really kind to anyone who does not fit into the narrow boxes people have built for themselves." "Why did you help me?" The question came out before she could stop it. "You do not know me. For all you know, I could be exactly what the minister's wife thinks I am." Kade met her eyes directly. "I know what I saw. A woman alone in a blizzard wearing a wedding dress. That told me everything I needed to know about your intentions and what happened to them." He poured himself a cup of coffee from a pot on the stove and took a long drink. "My mother was a mail-order bride. Came out to California in 1850 to marry a man she had never met. He was a good man, my father, and they were happy together until cholera took them both when I was 16. But she used to tell me stories about the women she traveled with, the ones whose husbands turned out to be liars or drunks or worse. She said the worst thing about the West was not the hardship, but the way people turned their backs on each other when help was most needed." Jennifer felt tears prick her eyes. "I am sorry about your parents. It was a long time ago." He set down his cup. "The point is, when I looked out my window and saw someone struggling in the snow, I did not have to think about whether to help. That is just what you do. You open your door and you say welcome home, even if it is just for one night. Welcome home." The words settled around her like the warm quilt, and she felt something break loose in her chest that had been frozen far longer than just this evening. When had anyone last made her feel welcome anywhere? When had she last felt like she belonged? "I do not have anywhere to go," she said, and the admission cost her what little pride she had left. "No money, no prospects, and now not even a dry dress to my name." "Then you will stay here tonight, and tomorrow we will figure out what comes next," Kade said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "You can take the bed. I will sleep up in the loft." "I cannot take your bed," she protested. "You can and you will." His tone left no room for argument. "You have been through enough tonight without trying to be noble about sleeping arrangements." Too tired to argue further, Jennifer allowed him to help her to the bed, which was surprisingly comfortable with a real feather mattress and plenty of blankets. She sank into it with a sigh, her body aching in ways she had not known were possible. Kade banked the fire in the stove so it would burn through the night, then climbed the ladder to the loft without another word. She heard him moving around up there, settling in for the night, and she stared at the ceiling thinking about the strangeness of fate that had brought her to this moment. She had expected to be married by now, to be lying in a marriage bed with a stranger who would become her husband. Instead, she was lying in the bed of a different stranger who had asked nothing of her except her name. The irony was not lost on her. Outside, the wind howled and the snow continued to fall, but inside the cabin it was warm and safe, and for the first time since leaving St. Louis, Jennifer Bradford felt something that might have been hope. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon frying, and for a confused moment she thought she was back home in her mother's kitchen. Then memory returned in a rush, and she sat up quickly, clutching the quilt to her chest. Morning light streamed through the cabin's two small windows, bright and cold. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Kade stood at the stove with his back to her, cooking breakfast with the same efficient competence he had shown the night before. He had shaved and changed his shirt, and his dark hair was still damp as if he had washed in cold water. He glanced over his shoulder when he heard her stir. "Good morning. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she said, and it was true. Her body ached and her pride was still bruised, but the desperate cold terror of the previous night had faded. "Thank you for taking me in. I do not know what would have happened if you had not." "I know what would have happened." His voice was grim. "Let us be grateful it did not come to that." He cracked another egg into the frying pan. "Your dress is dry. It is hanging behind the screen. Breakfast will be ready in a few minutes." Jennifer slipped behind the screen and found her wedding dress, now dry but sadly wrinkled. She put it on anyway, along with her undergarments, feeling more human once she was clothed. The dress was a bitter reminder of her foolishness, but it was better than wearing nothing but a quilt. She twisted her blonde hair into a simple braid and emerged to find Kade setting plates on a small table near the window. The meal was simple but well cooked, bacon and eggs and biscuits with butter, and Jennifer ate with an appetite sharpened by the previous day's ordeal. They ate in companionable silence for a while, and she found herself appreciating that Kade did not feel the need to fill every moment with chatter. There was something restful about his quiet presence. "What will you do?" he asked finally, setting down his fork. It was the question she had been dreading. "I do not know," she admitted. "I have no money for a train ticket back to St. Louis, and even if I did, there is nothing for me there. My brother made it clear I am not welcome in his home." "What about work? What can you do?" "I can read and write and do figures. I can sew and cook and keep house. I was a governess for a family in St. Louis for 3 years before the children grew too old to need me." She met his eyes. "I know that does not sound like much." "It sounds like more skills than half the people in this town possess," Kade said. "The problem is finding someone willing to hire you. Pyramid City is not a large place, and news travels fast. By now, everyone knows about the woman who showed up in a wedding dress with no groom." Jennifer felt her cheeks burn. "I have become the town scandal, through no fault of your own." Kade pushed back from the table and went to look out the window. The main street of Pyramid City was visible from here, and she could see people emerging from their homes to dig out from the snow. "There is a woman named Margaret Sullivan who runs the general store. She is a widow, sharp as a tack, and does not give a damn what anyone thinks. If anyone in this town might be willing to give you work, it would be her. Would you introduce me?" Jennifer asked, hating the note of pleading in her voice but unable to stop it. "I will do better than that. I will tell her that I will vouch for your character personally." He turned to face her, and his expression was serious. "But I need you to understand something, Miss Bradford. This town can be cruel and people will talk. If I help you, there will be assumptions made about the nature of our association. It might make things harder for you, not easier. If the alternative is freezing or starving, I will take my chances with gossip," Jennifer said firmly. Something that might have been approval flickered in Kade's dark eyes. "All right then. Get your coat on, and we will go talk to Margaret." The walk to the general store took them down the main street of Pyramid City, and Jennifer felt the weight of curious stares from every direction. Women whispered behind gloved hands, and men tipped their hats with expressions that ranged from pity to speculation. She held her head high and kept her eyes forward, determined not to show how much their judgment affected her. Kade walked beside her with his hand resting lightly on her elbow, a gesture of support that was also unmistakably proprietary. She wondered if he realized what message he was sending, or if he simply did not care. The general store was a solid 2-story building with a false front that made it look more impressive than it was. A bell jangled as they entered, and Jennifer found herself in a cluttered but well-organized space that smelled of leather and coffee, and the indefinable scent of dry goods. A woman in her 40s stood behind the counter, her steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, her sharp blue eyes taking in every detail of Jennifer's appearance in a single glance. "Kade Turner," the woman said, and her voice was as crisp as fresh snow. "I heard you pulled a half-frozen woman out of the storm last night. I take it this is she." "Margaret Sullivan, meet Jennifer Bradford," Kade said. "Miss Bradford needs work, and I thought you might be able to use help in the store." Margaret came around the counter and circled Jennifer slowly, studying her with the same critical eye she might apply to a horse she was considering purchasing. Jennifer stood still and let herself be examined, knowing that this woman held her future in her capable hands. "You are the mail-order bride who got stood up," Margaret said bluntly. "The one the Hendersons left outside the church." "Yes, madam." There was no point in denying it. "What skills do you have?" Jennifer repeated what she had told Kade, adding details about her experience as a governess and the household management she had learned from her mother. Margaret listened without interrupting, her expression giving nothing away. "Can you work a ledger?" Margaret asked. "Yes, madam. I kept the household accounts for the family I worked for in St. Louis." "Can you deal with minors who have been drinking and cowboys who think every woman in a store is there for their entertainment?" Jennifer lifted her chin. "I can handle myself, madam." Margaret smiled for the first time, a thin curve of her lips that suggested she approved of Jennifer's spirit. "I suppose you can, or you would not still be standing after what you went through yesterday." She glanced at Kade. "You vouch for her character." "I do. Even though you only met her last night, I know what I need to know." Margaret studied them both for a long moment, and Jennifer had the uncomfortable feeling that the older woman saw far more than they intended to reveal. Finally, she nodded. "All right. I will give you a trial period, Miss Bradford. 2 weeks, and if you work out, we will discuss permanent employment. The pay is not much, but you will get room and board in the apartment upstairs. It is not fancy, but it is private and warm." Relief flooded through Jennifer so strongly her knees went weak. "Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. I will not disappoint you. See that you do not." Margaret turned back to the counter. "You can start this afternoon. There is inventory to be done and shelves to be stocked. Wear something practical if you have it, though I suppose you do not have much in the way of clothing." "Just what I am wearing," Jennifer admitted. Margaret sighed. "Come with me. I will give you some things from the store. You can work off the cost." She paused and looked at Kade. "Thank you for bringing her to me. Most men in this town would not have bothered." "Most men in this town are fools," Kade said quietly, and he met Jennifer's eyes with something in his expression that made her heart skip. "If you need anything, Miss Bradford, anything at all, my cabin is 3 doors down from the church. You know where to find me." "Thank you, Mr. Turner." The words felt inadequate for what he had done, for the life he had quite literally saved. "I owe you everything. You owe me nothing." He tipped his hat to both women and left, the bell jangling behind him. Margaret watched him go with a thoughtful expression. "That is a good man," she said. "One of the few in this town worth knowing. Do not let whatever happens between you ruin that." "There is nothing happening between us," Jennifer protested. "He was just being kind." "Oh, my dear girl." Margaret's smile was knowing and not unkind. "If you believe that, you are not as clever as I think you are. Come along. Let us get you settled." The apartment above the store consisted of 2 small rooms, a bedroom and a sitting area with a tiny kitchen. It was sparsely furnished but clean, with a window that overlooked the main street. Margaret gave her 2 practical dresses, a warm coat and sturdy boots, all taken from store stock. Jennifer changed into one of the dresses, a simple gray wool that fit reasonably well, and felt more like herself than she had in days. She spent the afternoon learning the layout of the store and the prices of various goods, meeting the customers who came and went with their purchases and their curiosity. Most were polite enough, though she caught plenty of speculative glances and heard whispers that cut off when she came near. She smiled and helped where she could, and tried not to think about the fact that just 24 hours ago she had been expecting to become a married woman. Kade came in just before closing time, ostensibly to buy coffee and tobacco, but she suspected he really came to see how she was faring. Margaret raised an eyebrow but said nothing, leaving them alone while she went to check the back storeroom. "How was your first day?" he asked, leaning against the counter with an ease that suggested he spent considerable time in this store. "Exhausting but good," Jennifer said honestly. "Mrs. Sullivan is kind in her own way. She does not coddle me. Margaret does not coddle anyone. It is one of her best qualities." He studied her face. "You look tired." "I am tired, but it is a good tired, the kind that comes from honest work." She met his eyes. "Thank you again for what you did." "For everything." "Stop thanking me." But his voice was gentle. "Are you settled in the apartment? Do you need anything?" "I have more than I had yesterday, which is more than I dared hope for." She hesitated, then said, "Mrs. Sullivan said something strange." "She said not to let what happens between us ruin things, but there is nothing happening between us." Kade was quiet for a long moment. "Is that what you think?" he asked finally. Her heart began to beat faster. "What else would I think? You helped a stranger in need, that is all." "If that was all, I would have taken you to the boarding house or the church once the storm passed." He pushed away from the counter, and suddenly he was standing very close to her, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "I brought you to my home, Jennifer. I let you sleep in my bed. I took you to Margaret myself and vouched for you, knowing full well what people would say. Does that sound like the actions of a man who sees you as just a stranger?" She could barely breathe. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the moment I carried you out of that storm. I am saying that, when I saw you standing there in that wedding dress, frozen and alone, something in my chest cracked open." He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "I am saying that I know it is too soon and too fast, and you have every reason to be wary of men making promises. But I want you to know that I am here, and I am not going anywhere, and if you need time to figure out what you want, I will wait." Jennifer felt tears well up in her eyes. "I came here expecting to marry a stranger. That was supposed to be my practical solution to an impossible situation. I was not expecting kindness or patience or anything real." "Maybe you deserve something real," Kade said softly. "Maybe we both do." Before she could respond, Margaret's footsteps sounded on the stairs from the back, and Kade stepped away smoothly, putting a respectable distance between them. Margaret emerged carrying a crate of canned goods, her expression bland, but Jennifer suspected the older woman had timed her entrance deliberately. "Evening, Kade," Margaret said. "Was there something else you needed?" "Just the coffee and tobacco, thanks." He paid for his purchases and tipped his hat. "Good evening, ladies." After he left, Margaret set down the crate and gave Jennifer a long look. "That man is falling in love with you if he has not already fallen." "He barely knows me," Jennifer protested weakly. "Sometimes knowing does not take as long as people think." Margaret began unpacking the canned goods. "My husband proposed to me 3 days after we met. Everyone said we were crazy, that it would never last. We had 22 good years together before a mine accident took him from me." Her voice softened. "Do not dismiss something just because it happens quickly, Jennifer. Life out here is hard and uncertain. When you find something good, you hold on to it." Jennifer thought about those words as she lay in her narrow bed that night, listening to the sounds of Pyramid City settling down for the evening. Somewhere out there, 3 doors down from the church, Kade Turner was in his cabin, perhaps thinking of her the way she was thinking of him. It seemed impossible that her life could have changed so dramatically in the span of 2 days, from desperate and rejected to employed and desired. Part of her wanted to protect herself, to hold back and be cautious. But another part, the part that had been brave enough to travel halfway across the country for a chance at a new life, whispered that maybe Margaret was right. Maybe sometimes you just had to hold on to something good when you found it. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of work and routine. Jennifer learned the rhythms of the general store, the regular customers and their preferences, the way Margaret ran her business with an iron fist and a sharp mind. She learned which miners could be trusted to pay their tabs and which needed to be watched, which of the town's women would speak to her and which turned away with cold eyes. She learned that Pyramid City, despite its small size, was a complicated place full of complicated people, and that she would have to carve out her own place in it through sheer determination. Kade came into the store almost every day, sometimes with legitimate errands and sometimes with transparently flimsy excuses. He brought her small gifts, nothing extravagant but thoughtful, a pretty stone he found in the mountains, a book he thought she might enjoy, a pair of gloves lined with soft fur for the cold weather. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories of their pasts and their hopes for the future. She learned that he had been drifting since his parents died, working where he could and never staying in one place too long, that Pyramid City was the first town where he had stayed more than a season. Why here? She asked one afternoon when the store was quiet and Margaret had gone to make deliveries. Honestly, I am not sure. Kade leaned against the counter, his usual position, and looked around the store as if searching for answers in the neat rows of goods. I kept meaning to move on, but something held me here. I built the cabin thinking it would be temporary, just a place to stay through the winter. Then winter passed and I was still here. Then another year went by and another. He looked at her. Now I think maybe I was waiting for something. Or someone. Do not say things like that, Jennifer whispered, but her protest was weak. Why not if it is true? He reached across the counter and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and strong. I am done pretending I do not feel what I feel, Jennifer. I know you are still finding your feet here. I know you have been hurt and you have every reason to be cautious. But I need you to know that this is not some passing fancy for me. When I look at you, I see a future I did not know I wanted until you stumbled into my life. She should pull her hand away, should maintain some professional distance, but she did not want to. His touch felt like an anchor in a world that had been unmoored for too long. I am frightened, she admitted, of feeling too much too fast, of making another mistake. Then we will go slow, Kade said. As slow as you need, but do not shut me out because you are afraid. Give us a chance. All right, she breathed, and it felt like stepping off a cliff into open air, terrifying and exhilarating at once. A chance. His smile transformed his face, lighting up his eyes in a way that made her heart stutter. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and courtly it made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. Margaret chose that moment to bustle back into the store carrying an empty delivery basket. She took one look at them and shook her head. You two are hopeless, she announced, but she was smiling. Jennifer, why do not you take the rest of the afternoon off? I can manage here. Are you certain? Jennifer asked, reluctant to leave Margaret alone even though business was slow. I am certain that you have worked hard for 2 weeks and earned some time to yourself. Margaret shooed them toward the door. Go on, get out of here before I change my mind. They walked through town together, and Jennifer noticed that some of the curious stares had turned warmer, as if people were beginning to accept her presence. Or perhaps They simply recognized that Kade Turner had claimed her, and that changed things. She was not sure how she felt about being claimed, but she could not deny that there was a certain safety in it, a protection from the harsher judgments of the world. Kade took her to a hill overlooking the town, a steep climb that left her breathless but offered a view worth the effort. Pyramid City spread out below them, small and insignificant against the vast sweep of the Nevada desert. To the east, the distant peaks of the mountains were still capped with snow. To the west, the desert rolled away in shades of brown and gold beneath a sky so blue it hurt to look at. "This is my favorite place," Kade said, settling onto a flat rock and pulling her down beside him. "When things get too loud or too complicated, I come up here and remember how small all our problems really are." Jennifer leaned against him, grateful for his warmth as the wind picked up. "It is beautiful, harsh but beautiful. That is the West in general, I think. Nothing here is gentle or easy, but there is a kind of honesty to it. The land does not lie to you about what it is or what it requires. Unlike people," Jennifer said quietly. "Unlike some people." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I promise you, Jennifer, I will never lie to you. Even if the truth is hard, even if it is not what you want to hear, I will always be honest." She turned to look at him, this man who had saved her life and was now trying to save something deeper, her ability to trust and hope again. "Why me?" she asked. "I am nothing special, Kade. I am a woman who got fooled by a con artist and ended up stranded in a strange town. I have no money, no family, nothing to offer you. You have yourself to offer, and that is everything." He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You are brave and strong and determined. You could have given up when the Hendersons left you, could have just laid down in the snow and let go. But you did not. You kept fighting. And when Margaret tested you, when this town judged you, you held your head high and proved yourself. That is not nothing, Jennifer. That is everything that matters." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she did not try to stop them. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "How to let someone in again." "Neither do I," he admitted. "I have been alone for so long I forgot what it felt like to want more. But we will figure it out together. That is what partners do." He kissed her then, soft and gentle and sweet, and it felt like coming home to a place she had never been but had always been searching for. His lips were warm despite the cold wind, and he tasted of coffee and hope. She kissed him back, tentative at first and then with growing confidence, letting herself feel the connection sparking between them. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard, and the world seemed brighter somehow, more vivid. "That was my first real kiss," Jennifer said, then laughed at his surprised expression. "I mean, I have been kissed before, but never like that, never like it meant something." "It means everything," Kade said seriously. "At least to me." They sat on the hill until the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, talking and kissing and making plans for a future that was beginning to take shape in both their minds. Kade told her about his dream of finding a good silver claim, of striking it rich enough to build a real house instead of a cabin. Jennifer told him about wanting a home filled with books and children and laughter, a place where people were welcome and loved unconditionally. "I can give you that," Kade said. "Maybe not the riches, but the rest of it. I can give you a home and a family and all the love you can stand." "That sounds better than riches," Jennifer said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. They walked back to town as darkness fell, hand in hand, and when they reached the general store, Kade kissed her goodbye with a promise to see her tomorrow. Jennifer climbed the stairs to her small apartment feeling lighter than she had in years, as if she had shed some heavy burden she did not even know she was carrying. Margaret was waiting for her in the sitting room, which was unusual enough to give Jennifer pause. The older woman gestured for her to sit. "There is something you need to know," Margaret said without preamble. "The man who wrote you those letters, the one who brought you out here, he has been found." Jennifer's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, found?" A traveling salesman recognized the name from the story going around town. Turns out there is a man using that exact scheme in several towns along the railway, convincing women to travel out for marriage, and then stealing whatever valuables they bring with them. The marshal in Virginia City arrested him this morning. They found letters from dozens of women in his room. Jennifer sat down heavily, her legs suddenly weak. "So it was not even personal. I was just another mark." "I am afraid so." Margaret's expression was sympathetic. "The marshal wants to know if you will press charges. He says with enough victims willing to testify, they can send this man to prison for a long time." "Will the other women testify?" "Some will, some will not. Many are too ashamed to admit what happened." Jennifer thought about that, about the shame that seemed to follow women no matter what circumstances befell them. She thought about the way the town had judged her for being abandoned, as if it were somehow her fault that she had been lied to. And she thought about what Kade had said, about the importance of truth even when it was hard. "I will testify," she said firmly. "If my story can help put this man away and prevent him from hurting anyone else, then yes, I will stand up in court and tell the truth." "It will not be easy," Margaret warned. "People will ask invasive questions. Your name will be in the newspapers. I have already been the subject of gossip and speculation. At least this way it will serve a purpose." Jennifer lifted her chin. "When does the marshal need me?" "The trial is set for 3 weeks from now in Virginia City. You will need to travel there and stay for several days while the case proceeds." "I will go." Jennifer felt a strange sense of relief, as if something had been decided that had been weighing on her. This man should not be allowed to keep destroying lives. Margaret reached over and squeezed her hand. "You are stronger than you know, Jennifer Bradford. Kade Turner is a lucky man." The news about the trial spread through Pyramid City faster than a wildfire, and Jennifer found herself once again the subject of intense scrutiny. But this time, something had shifted. Instead of judgment, she encountered support from unexpected quarters. Women who had previously avoided her stopped by the store to share their own stories of being deceived or mistreated, offering quiet words of encouragement. Even some of the men, the ones who had daughters or sisters, told her they admired her courage in standing up to face her tormentor in court. Kade's reaction was immediate and protective. "I am coming with you to Virginia City," he announced the moment he heard. "You are not facing this alone." "You do not need to do that," Jennifer protested. "You have work. The work can wait. You are more important." He took her hands in his. "Please, Jennifer, let me be there for you." She looked into his eyes and saw not pity but partnership, a desire to stand beside her through the hard things as well as the good. "All right," she said. "Come with me." The journey to Virginia City took a full day by stagecoach, rattling over rough roads through spectacular mountain scenery. Kade sat beside her the whole way, a solid presence that kept the anxiety at bay. They stayed in a modest hotel near the courthouse, separate rooms because neither of them wanted to give ammunition to those who might use impropriety to discredit her testimony. The trial itself was grueling. Jennifer took the stand and told her story to a courtroom full of strangers, describing the letters she had received and the promises that had been made. She endured questions from the defense attorney, a slick man who tried to suggest that she had been foolish to believe the letters, that perhaps she had even been complicit in some scheme to defraud her supposed fiancé. But she held firm, refusing to be shaken, and when the prosecutor showed the jury the stack of identical letters sent to women all over the West, the truth became undeniable. 5 other women testified as well, each with a similar story, each carrying the weight of humiliation and loss. By the time the prosecution rested, the jury looked righteously angry. It took them less than 2 hours to return a guilty verdict, and the judge sentenced the con man to 10 years in prison with evident satisfaction. Jennifer walked out of the courthouse feeling as if a chapter of her life had finally closed. Kade was waiting on the steps, and he pulled her into his arms right there in front of everyone, holding her tight while she shook with reaction. "You were magnificent," he murmured into her hair. "So brave and strong. I am so proud of you." "It is over," she whispered. "Really over. I can move forward now." "Then let us move forward together." Kade pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "I know this is fast, and I know we have only known each other for a month. But I also know what I feel, and I do not want to waste time pretending otherwise. Jennifer Bradford, will you marry me?" Her heart stopped, then started again at double speed. "You are asking me to marry you, now, here. I am asking you to marry me whenever you are ready. Today, tomorrow, next year. I do not care when, as long as the answer is yes." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple silver ring set with a small turquoise stone. "I know it is not much, but it is honest, like everything I want to give you. Say yes, Jennifer. Give me the chance to spend the rest of my life proving that not all men are liars." She looked at the ring, at his earnest face, at the future opening up before her like the vast western sky. Every rational thought told her this was too fast, too risky. But her heart, that stubborn organ that had survived so much disappointment, knew better. "Yes," she said, and laughed at the joy that blazed across his face. "Yes, Kade Turner, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her right there on the courthouse steps. A kiss that promised everything and demanded nothing. A kiss that sealed a bargain between 2 souls who had found each other against all odds. People passing by smiled and offered congratulations, and for once Jennifer did not care what strangers thought. She had found her home, and it was not a place but a person. They were married 2 days later in Virginia City. A simple ceremony in a small church with Margaret Sullivan and the hotel proprietor as witnesses. Jennifer wore a new dress of deep blue wool, a gift from Margaret, and carried a small bouquet of winter flowers that Kade had somehow procured despite the season. The minister who performed the ceremony was an old man with kind eyes who spoke about the sanctity of marriage and the importance of building a life on honesty and trust. When Kade slipped a matching silver band onto his own finger and then kissed his new wife, Jennifer felt tears of happiness stream down her face. They spent their wedding night in the hotel, and if Jennifer had feared that the intimacy of marriage might be awkward or uncomfortable, Kade's gentle patience put those fears to rest. He made love to her as if she were something precious and rare, taking his time to learn what pleased her, whispering words of love and devotion that made her feel cherished in ways she had never imagined possible. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, she felt more at peace than she had in her entire life. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I do not think I realized how much until just now. I have loved you since the moment I saw you standing in that snow," Kade replied, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "You looked so lost and so brave at the same time, and something in me just knew. This is her. This is the one I have been waiting for." "We are going to have a good life together," Jennifer said with sudden certainty. "I know it will not always be easy, but it will be good." "The best," Kade agreed and kissed the top of her head, "now and always." They returned to Pyramid City as husband and wife. And if some people in town were scandalized by the speed of their courtship and marriage, most seemed genuinely happy for them. Margaret threw them a celebration at the general store, inviting half the town to toast the new couple with cider and cake. Even the minister's wife, who had turned Jennifer away on that terrible night, came to offer stiff congratulations and a set of embroidered pillowcases. Jennifer continued to work at the general store, though now she went home each evening to Kade's cabin rather than the apartment above the shop. They fell into an easy domestic rhythm, cooking together and sharing stories of their days, making plans for the future they were building together. Kade taught her to shoot a rifle, essential skills for a woman living in the West, and she taught him to read better than he had before, opening up whole new worlds of stories and ideas. Winter melted into spring, and spring into summer. Kade found steady work at a nearby mine, bringing home wages that allowed them to start saving for a real house. Jennifer discovered she was pregnant in July, and the joy on Kade's face when she told him was worth every moment of morning sickness and discomfort that followed. They spent evenings discussing names and planning for the baby, arguing good-naturedly about whether they needed a bigger house before the child arrived. The question became moot when Kade's luck finally turned. He had been working a small silver claim on the weekends, more out of hope than expectation, when he struck a vein of ore rich enough to make them genuinely wealthy. The claim sold for more money than either of them had dreamed possible, enough to build the house Kade had always wanted and set aside funds for their child's future. They built the house on the hill overlooking Pyramid City, the place where Kade had first kissed her. It was a beautiful home, 2 stories with real glass windows and a wraparound porch, large enough for the family they hoped to have. Jennifer filled it with books and comfortable furniture, creating the warm, welcoming space she had always dreamed of. They moved in during September, just in time for the baby's arrival. Their son was born in late October during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and made the midwife nervous. But the birth was relatively easy, and when Jennifer heard that first indignant cry, she wept with relief and joy. Kade held his son with shaking hands, his dark eyes bright with tears, and whispered promises to always protect and love this tiny person they had created together. They named him Benjamin, after Kade's father, and called him Ben. He was a happy baby with his mother's blonde hair and his father's dark eyes, and he quickly became the center of their universe. Kade was a devoted father, taking Ben with him everywhere once he was old enough, teaching him about the land and the animals and the importance of honest work. Jennifer watched her husband with their son and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. This was the life she had dreamed of during all those lonely years in St. Louis, the home and family she had been willing to risk everything to find. That it had come through hardship and humiliation, and near death only made it more precious. 2 years later, their daughter arrived, a tiny thing they named Emma, who had her father's dark coloring and her mother's stubborn chin. Ben was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to help care for her, and the sight of her 2 children together made Jennifer ache with happiness. Margaret Sullivan became a constant presence in their lives, a surrogate grandmother to the children and a trusted friend to both Jennifer and Kade. She eventually sold the general store and retired to a small cottage near their house, declaring that she was too old to keep working but not too old to spoil her adopted grandchildren. The years passed in a blur of laughter and love, of birthday celebrations and Christmas gatherings, of watching their children grow and thrive in the wild Nevada landscape. Ben grew tall and strong like his father, with the same quiet competence and unshakable integrity. Emma was fierce and bright, constantly asking questions and challenging assumptions, reminding Jennifer of her younger self. Kade expanded his business interests, investing in mining operations and eventually opening a small lumber mill that provided good jobs for local men. He developed a reputation as a fair employer and an honest businessman, someone whose word was worth more than any contract. Jennifer became involved in the community, helping to establish a proper school for the children of Pyramid City and a lending library that became the heart of the town's social life. They faced hardships, of course. There were years when the mines ran thin and money was tight. There was the terrible winter when Emma fell ill with pneumonia, and they sat up for 3 nights straight not knowing if she would survive. There were arguments and disagreements, moments of frustration and fear. But through it all, they held fast to each other and to the promises they had made on those courthouse steps in Virginia City. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kade took Jennifer back to the hill where he had first proposed, where their house now stood proud and solid against the desert sky. They sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple, their children playing in the yard below under Margaret's watchful eye. "You ever regret it?" Kade asked, reaching for her hand. "Coming out here, answering that advertisement?" Jennifer was quiet for a moment, thinking about the terrified woman she had been, standing outside that church in her ruined wedding dress. "I regret the pain and fear of that night," she said finally. "I regret trusting someone who did not deserve it. But I cannot regret the chain of events that led me to you, to this life we have built together. All of it was necessary to bring me home. You know, I still remember exactly what I said when I opened my door and saw you standing there," Kade said, a smile playing at his lips. "You said, 'Good Lord, you are frozen through,'" Jennifer reminded him, laughing. "No, after that, after I got you inside and you were safe." He turned to face her, his eyes serious and soft. "I said, 'Welcome home,' and I meant it even then. Somehow I knew that you belonged there, that you belonged with me." "Welcome home," Jennifer repeated softly. "Those were the most beautiful words anyone had ever said to me, still are. Because they were true then and they are true now." Kade lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, the same courtly gesture he had made in the general store all those years ago. "You are my home, Jennifer Turner. You and our children and this life we have made. Everything good that I have, everything that matters, started the night you stumbled into my world half frozen and desperate. And everything good that I have started the moment you chose to see me instead of judging me, to help me instead of turning away." Jennifer leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sun sink lower. "I came out here looking for a husband, for security and a practical solution to my problems. Instead, I found love. Real love, the kind I thought only existed in books." "Better than books," Kade murmured. "Because it is ours, and it is real, and it is forever." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. In the yard below, Ben was teaching Emma how to identify the constellations, his young voice serious and patient. Margaret called them inside for supper, and the warm light from the house windows spilled out across the porch. "We should go in," Jennifer said, but she did not move, reluctant to break the spell of this perfect moment. "In a minute." Kade tightened his arm around her. "I just want to stay here a little longer with you, remembering how lucky I am." "We are both lucky," Jennifer corrected. "Lucky to have found each other, lucky to have this family, lucky to have survived all the things that could have torn us apart." More years passed, bringing new joys and new challenges. Ben grew into a fine young man who chose to study law, determined to fight injustice wherever he found it. Emma discovered a gift for painting, her canvases capturing the stark beauty of the Nevada landscape, in ways that made people from back east pay surprising amounts of money for her work. Kade and Jennifer became grandparents, delighting in Ben's children and eventually Emma's as well, watching a new generation grow up in the house on the hill. Margaret lived to see all of it, passing peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by the family she had chosen if not been born to. At her funeral, Jennifer gave a eulogy that had half the town weeping, talking about the woman who had given her a chance when no one else would, who had taught her that family was something you built rather than something you were born with. "She saved my life," Jennifer said, her voice strong despite her grief. "Not as dramatically as my husband did that winter night, but just as surely. She gave me work and dignity and a chance to prove myself. She gave me wisdom and friendship and love. I will miss her every day for the rest of my life, and I will honor her memory by passing on the gift she gave me, by extending kindness to those who need it most." Kade stood beside her throughout the service, his hand never leaving the small of her back, still her anchor after all these years. That night, lying in bed with his arms around her, Jennifer wept for the woman who had been such an important part of their story. "She would be proud of you," Kade whispered into her hair. "Proud of the woman you have become, the life you have built. She loved you like a daughter, you know." "I know." Jennifer's voice was muffled against his chest. "And I loved her like a mother. After my own mother died, I thought I would never have that kind of connection again, but Margaret proved me wrong." "She had a gift for proving people wrong," Kade said with a sad smile. "That was one of her many talents." They were both 60 years old when Pyramid City decided to honor them at a town celebration, recognizing their contributions to the community over the decades. The whole town turned out for the event, and Jennifer was overwhelmed by the speeches and testimonials, by the way people talked about how Kade's fairness as an employer had changed the culture of the mining industry in the region, how her work establishing schools and libraries had transformed opportunities for children who might otherwise have had none. But the moment that moved her most was when a young woman approached her after the formal ceremonies, a woman she did not recognize. "Mrs. Turner," the young woman said nervously, "you do not know me, but I wanted to thank you. My mother was one of the women who testified against that con man all those years ago, the one who brought you out here with false promises. She always said that watching you stand up in court, seeing your courage and determination, gave her the strength to testify as well. She died last year, but before she passed, she made me promise to find you and tell you that your bravery mattered, that it changed lives beyond just your own." Jennifer felt tears prick her eyes. She reached out and took the young woman's hands. "What was your mother's name?" "Sarah Lawson. She went on to marry a good man and have a happy life, but she never forgot you or what you did." "Please tell your family that I honor your mother's memory," Jennifer said softly. "We were all victims of the same cruel man, but we found the strength to stand together. That is a powerful thing." After the young woman left, Kade found Jennifer sitting on a bench near the town square, tears streaming down her face. He sat beside her without a word, just putting his arm around her and pulling her close. "I had no idea," she whispered. "I never thought about how my testimony might have affected the other women. I was just focused on getting through it." "That is the thing about courage," Kade said quietly. "The person showing it rarely realizes the impact it has on others. You have spent 40 years being brave and strong and kind, and you are only now beginning to understand how many lives you have touched." Jennifer corrected. "We have touched lives together. None of this would have been possible without you, without that moment when you opened your door and brought me in from the cold." "Then I suppose we are both lucky," Kade said, echoing words she had spoken so many years before. "Lucky to have found each other when we needed it most." They sat together as the sun set over Pyramid City, watching the town they had helped build go about its evening routines. Children played in the streets that had once been little more than dirt paths. Electric lights were beginning to replace oil lamps in the newer buildings, signs of progress and changing times. But some things remained constant: the mountains on the horizon, the vast stretch of desert, and the love between a cowboy and the woman he had saved from a blizzard. As they aged, Kade and Jennifer settled into a comfortable routine, spending their days on the porch of their beloved house, receiving visits from children and grandchildren, telling stories of the old days to anyone who would listen. Kade's hair turned silver, but his eyes remained sharp and his hands remained strong. Jennifer's blonde hair faded to white, but her mind stayed keen and her spirit remained undimmed. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by their family, an enormous gathering that filled the house and spilled out into the yard. Ben proposed a toast that had everyone reaching for handkerchiefs. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught me that true love is not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but about choosing each other every single day. Who showed me that courage means standing up for what is right even when it is hard. Who built a life based on honesty and kindness and unwavering commitment. May we all be so lucky as to find what they found that snowy night in 1883. Emma added her own toast. "To the man who opened his door to a stranger and said, 'Welcome home,' and to the woman who was brave enough to walk through it. Thank you for showing us what it means to build a family based on love rather than obligation." Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Jennifer and Kade lay in their bed holding hands in the darkness. Their bodies had grown old and weary, but the connection between them remained as strong as ever. "You remember what you said to me on our 10th anniversary?" Jennifer asked. "About how you knew I belonged with you." "I remember everything about us," Kade said. "Every word, every moment. I want you to know that you were right. I did belong with you from that very first night, and I still belong with you even now, even as we grow old together." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for believing in me when I could not believe in myself. Thank you for loving me with such constancy and devotion. Thank you for trusting me enough to say yes," Kade replied. "For taking a chance on a rough cowboy who did not have much to offer except his heart." "Your heart was everything I needed," Jennifer whispered. "It still is." They drifted off to sleep that way, hands clasped, hearts beating in sync, two souls that had found their home in each other. Kade passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later at the age of 77. He simply did not wake up one morning, his face calm and peaceful, no sign of pain or struggle. Jennifer found him there beside her and knew immediately that he was gone. She did not scream or panic. Instead, she lay down next to him one last time, put her hand over his heart, and said goodbye to the man who had been her partner, her love, her home for 52 years. The funeral was the largest Pyramid City had ever seen, with people coming from all over Nevada to pay their respects to a man who had lived his life with integrity and kindness. Jennifer stood at the grave site with her children on either side of her, accepting condolences with quiet grace. She did not cry until that night, alone in the house on the hill, when the full weight of her loss finally hit her, but she did not stay alone for long. Ben and Emma took turns staying with her, and the grandchildren visited constantly, filling the house with life and noise and love. Jennifer knew that Kade would not want her to waste away in grief, so she forced herself to keep living, to keep participating in the community they had built together. She lived another 8 years, years filled with watching her grandchildren grow into adults and have children of their own, years of continuing the work she and Kade had started. She donated money to expand the library and establish a scholarship fund for mining families. She wrote down her memories in a journal, wanting to preserve the story of how she and Kade had found each other for future generations. On a spring morning in 1935, Jennifer woke up feeling different somehow, lighter. She got dressed and asked Ben, who was staying with her that week, to take her up to the hill behind the house, to the spot where Kade had proposed all those decades ago. Ben helped her make the climb, patient with her slow pace, and settled her on a bench he had installed there years before. "I will be right inside if you need me," Ben said, but Jennifer shook her head. "I am fine here," she assured him. "Go on. I just want to sit for a while and remember." After he left, Jennifer sat looking out over Pyramid City, thinking about the long, strange journey that had brought her to this place. She thought about the frightened girl who had stepped off the train wearing a wedding dress, her heart full of hope and terror. She thought about the Hendersons leaving her at the church, about standing in the snow certain she was going to die. She thought about Kade opening his door, about the way he had looked at her not with pity but with recognition, as if he had been waiting for her all along. She thought about their first kiss on this very hill, about their wedding in Virginia City, about bringing baby Ben home to the cabin that would later be torn down to make room for this beautiful house. She thought about teaching Emma to read, about Kade teaching Ben to ride, about all the ordinary moments that had made up their extraordinary life together. "I am coming, my love," she whispered to the wind. "I kept my promise. I lived fully and loved deeply and made a difference where I could. But I am ready now, ready to come home to you." She closed her eyes, letting the spring sun warm her face, feeling at peace in a way she had not since Kade's death. When Ben came to check on her an hour later, he found her sitting peacefully on the bench, a slight smile on her face, her hand resting over her heart. She had passed as quietly and gently as her husband, ready to begin the next part of the journey. They buried Jennifer next to Kade on the hill overlooking Pyramid City. And at her funeral, Emma read from the journal her mother had kept, sharing the story of how a cowboy had opened his door to a freezing stranger and changed both their lives forever. "She wrote this just last month," Emma said, her voice thick with tears. She said, "I came to Nevada believing I was looking for a husband, for security and stability. Instead, I found a home in the truest sense of the word. Not a building or a place, but a person who saw me when I was invisible, who valued me when I felt worthless, who loved me when I believed I was unlovable." Kade Turner opened his door on a winter night and said, "Welcome home," and in doing so, he gave me everything I had been searching for without knowing it. He gave me himself, freely and completely, and in return, I gave him the same. Our love was not perfect, but it was real and true and lasting. It was the greatest gift of my life, and I am grateful for every moment we shared, every challenge we overcame, every joy we celebrated together. To anyone reading this in the future, know that love is always worth the risk. Trust is always worth the leap of faith. And home is wherever your heart recognizes its match. The words hung in the air, and there was hardly a dry eye among the hundreds of people gathered to say goodbye. Jennifer had touched so many lives, had made such a difference in the world, all because one man had chosen compassion over convenience, had chosen to help rather than to judge. Ben spoke next, sharing memories of his parents' enduring love. "They showed me that marriage is a choice you make every single day, not just on your wedding day. They taught me that disagreements do not mean the absence of love, that hard times can make your bond stronger rather than weaker. Most importantly, they taught me that when you find someone worth keeping, you hold on tight and never let go." Years turned into decades, and the story of Kade and Jennifer Turner became legend in Pyramid City. The house on the hill was preserved as a historical landmark, and visitors came from all over to hear the tale of the mail-order bride who was abandoned in a blizzard, and the cowboy who saved her. The library that Jennifer had founded was named in her honor, and a scholarship in Kade's name helped generations of young people pursue their dreams. Their descendants multiplied and spread across the country, but many remained in Nevada, carrying on the legacy of integrity and compassion that Kade and Jennifer had established. Every year on the anniversary of that fateful winter night, the family gathered at the house on the hill to remember and celebrate the love story that had started it all. The story of how a man opened his door and said welcome home to a stranger became more than just family history. It became a reminder that small acts of kindness can change the entire trajectory of a life, that courage is often found in the most desperate moments, and that true love can bloom in the most unlikely circumstances. It reminded people that home is not always where you start, but where you are welcomed, where you are seen and valued and loved for exactly who you are in the end. Jennifer's journey from St. Louis to Pyramid City, from desperation to devotion, from loneliness to love, was a testament to the power of human connection and the resilience of the human spirit. She had set out looking for one thing and found something infinitely better. She had faced rejection and humiliation and near death, and had emerged stronger and more compassionate for the trials. And it all began on a winter night in 1883, when a frightened woman in a wedding dress stood shivering outside a church, and a cowboy with a good heart opened his door and offered her not just shelter from the storm, but a home for her heart. That moment of grace and compassion rippled out through time, affecting countless lives, proving that sometimes the most important decisions we make are the ones where we choose kindness over convenience, connection over judgment, and love over fear. The blizzard that had brought Jennifer to Pyramid City was long forgotten by most, just another winter storm in a town that saw many harsh seasons. But for those who knew the story, every snowfall was a reminder of the night everything changed. The night two lonely souls found each other in the cold and darkness, and built something warm and lasting that would endure long after they were gone. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, a cowboy and a mail-order bride walked hand in hand through eternal sunshine, finally and forever home,